Welcome. My name is Karl Murphy. I'm the president and co-founder of Spiffy. And today we are continuing our series, Inside Voices, Career Paths at Spiffy. And we're talking with Austin Chapa, the site services manager for our car sales certification facility. We call it MCO-R1. That's the internal lingo. But Austin basically runs a repair shop that helps our clients take cars they purchase that are used and move them into their used car sales business. And he's based in Orlando. Austin, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. So look, we normally start with like, hey, where'd you grow up? What'd you do before you got to Spiffy? Tell me a little bit about where you're from and how you ended up as a Spiffy manager.
Yeah. So that's there's a little bit of background behind that. I've I've grown up in a lot of places. To start, I was born in Italy, overseas in a military family. I didn't stay there for too long. I then spent the next 13 years of my life in the Sunshine State of Orlando, Florida. Spent a lot of time there, and then I did go back overseas to South Korea, where I spent my high school years. So spent about 4 years in Seoul, growing up with my father, adapting to the culture, learning new people,
Yeah.
just figuring everything out, brand new, fresh. And that was quite an experience. Um,
What branch is your dad in?
he was in the Navy
Yeah.
over 25 years, uh, E8, something like that. Don't quote me
Yeah.
on that. But yeah,
Yeah.
he was up there and spent his whole career in the Navy. So I'm proud of that. I'm proud to come from that.
Yeah.
And following that, later in my kind of adult years, I transitioned between multiple cities in Texas, Houston, and Austin specifically, and then found my way back here to Florida.
Awesome. And so you joined us. We bought a company called YLL, right? Your Location Lubrication in Orlando back in 19, right? You were working for them?
I was. So that was my kind of first big job here once I moved back to Florida. Started out dispatching for YLL, Your Location Lubrication. Right up until COVID, I was doing that for close to 2 years. COVID happened, and then so did Spiffy happen, which
Yeah.
like act of God pretty much.
Yeah.
Um, so Spiffy acquired YLL, and I transitioned from my dispatching role into the Spiffy umbrella of FAM, Fleet Account Management, which
Yep.
was pretty in line with what I was doing prior, just now under the guidance of Spiffy.
Yeah. Yeah. So, uh, yeah, I'm just, editorial, when we buy companies, we buy them for a couple of reasons. One, we buy them for the revenue and the profits, but two, we also buy them for the people. People are a competitive advantage and we were like super fired up about all the talent that came over from YLL. So, thanks for coming over and thanks for staying.
Yep.
So what was that like? Talk about the feelings you had when, like, so the owner was Zach. So who'd you find out that Spiffy was buying YLL? How'd you find out? What were your thoughts going through your mind at that point?
So a couple months leading up to the actual acquisition, I had heard rumblings from various sources that Zach may be selling the company to who I'm not sure.
Right.
And then, I always like to keep an eye on the job market. I started seeing all these applications for Spiffy popping up everywhere.
Right.
I'm like, oh, this is very similar to kind of what we're doing.
Right.
And I never heard the word or the name Spiffy directly from anybody in YLL.
Right.
But I want to say early November, maybe late August, I got the news that Spiffy had acquired us.
Right.
Uh, and we kind of just kept the ball rolling from there. Very shortly after that, I flew up to Raleigh, met the headquarters,
Yeah.
met new FAM team members. I'll give shout outs to Aaron Bolgen, Addison Lessing, great team members.
Still,
Really
still, still in the company, right? They're still here.
still in the company. Both are doing different roles now, excelling in those roles.
Yep.
That was kind of my first taste of the Spiffy culture and what it'd be like to work for Spiffy.
Yeah.
So again, big shout out to them. They kind of showed me all the positives that there are to working for this company,
Yep.
along with the transparency and the culture I just fell in love with right away.
Yeah. So it's good. So, you came up that was interesting. So when we bought the company, right? So the transaction happened basically like we signed the paperwork in so long story, I should probably interview Zach about this. We started talking to Zach Zeller, the owner of YLL, I wanna say it was July, June, July. In any case, spent a couple months talking to him, and then we ended up closing the deal in November at some point. And then it took us about, it took us, December, January, February, but quickly, but nonetheless, took us about 3 months to integrate the companies. And you guys did things differently, used different software, and there was some different stuff. And we were like, hey, we want to keep everybody on board. And then we had this big meeting, and it was in January, February, wasn't it? Or maybe it was December. I forget when it was, but everybody came up to Raleigh, right?
Yep.
All the managers and key folks, and you were on that team, which was awesome. Um, I remember having like it was like a car fair rodeo over at the hotel. We had all the trucks out and everything. Remember
Yeah.
that? It was pretty funny, pretty good, interesting nonetheless. Um, and then we closed it. We officially said, "Hey, look, companies are integrated." It was March 1st, and then, like 3 weeks later, it was March 17th. I personally mark the beginning of COVID as March 17th. That was the day the ACC canceled the ACC basketball tournament. And
Oh,
if you're in North Carolina and the ACC tournament is canceled, the world's coming to an end. Like, that is, you know people bury relatives on Monday, and Monday afternoon, they're at, like, basketball games because that's how important it is to them. Quite literally, that happens in the Southeast. And then, we couldn't go to games. I was like, my son was like, "What's going on? The world's changing." And then we had to go deal with all those changes. So tell me about, so it's interesting. Talk about that transition. So you transitioned to a new company, and then we had the COVID thing. What are your thoughts, and what do you remember from that, like, March, April, May period of COVID?
yeah. So, uh, the acquisition happened, and I could be remembering this incorrectly, but how I saw it, acquisition happened, COVID happened kind of to the same timeline. Everything, went out the window at that point. Um, Coming from YLL, I was dispatching 10 to 20 technicians a day on various routes.
Right,
After COVID happened and Spiffy happened, I think I started with 4 technicians.
right.
And then after a week, that teetered down to 2. And then we found that 1 technician was the realistic solution to stay profitable right now and still do our best to service the customers that we need to
Yeah,
service. Um, I worked from home for close to at least a year, if not longer during that time.
yeah,
That was, you know, change for me as well. Just learning to adapt to the Spiffy way in the confines of my bedroom, pretty much.
yeah,
But the overall journey was exciting. I learned invaluable lessons again from both Addison and Aaron on how to present myself to customers, the right verbiage and word use.
yeah,
I'm saying that wrong,
yeah,
but
yeah,
how to grammatically speak to customers in the most potent way, and really how to just capture and show that hunger to get the business.
yeah,
Uh, that was exciting for me. And slowly but surely, as the months crept on, and as Spiffy kind of evolved to the COVID market, we introduced the decon tablets, which was a huge success.
right,
Enterprise implemented new processes, which we then had to kind of work around.
right,
Somebody had COVID, we can't touch the car for 3 days, yada,
right.
yada. So it was interesting. I could see that there was a lot of changes that I wasn't expecting, but I was excited to tackle.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Um, yeah, so for everyone's benefit, the YLL had, like, a couple of customers. They tended to be really big, rental car companies, and Spiffy had a lot of small customers, and we had a lot of retail. It was interesting. Spiffy was, like, 80% consumer pre-COVID, and then with the integration, and now now being 2024, we're, like, 90% fleet. And a big part of that was the YLL acquisition, and then just sort of the evolution of the business because of COVID. Um, we found selling to big companies was easier than selling to consumers, and we used to go to office buildings to service all the consumers, and then, with COVID, like, no one went back to the office for a couple of years, and now it's coming back. But that was a big change for us. Yeah, so tell me about your career path. You're at YLL in what they call dispatch. You came to Spiffy Fleet Account Management, which is basically the same thing, different name, a little bit different book of business, some different processes, um, different software. I remember we had all this. You guys had your own software. We had our software. Like, trying to mix them was chaos. Who's it easier? It was like this whole thing. Um, what happened? So tell me about your career path after, from FAM to, because you became a supervisor, right? You worked for Leo, is that right? At
Yeah,
least
so I
no, you worked for Race, right?
I worked for a race initially.
Yeah,
My transition from fam into the operation side of things was a little challenging at first, admittedly. I feel like um towards the end of my fam career, I was doing a lot of the operations tasks while I was still doing my fam duties. So I'm kind of I don't want to say I was doing two jobs at once, but my workload was definitely sizable,
yeah,
especially working in Orlando, one of the biggest markets in the
yeah.
company to begin with. And over time, I just kind of felt like it was hindering my performance, either on the operations side or on the
Yeah.
fam side.
Yeah,
I
you were
felt,
you were for sure doing both. Like, I'll validate that you were doing both, right?
yeah,
And it
yeah,
and it
well,
wasn't it wasn't the easiest to do both, and it was challenging. Again, you powered through it, but
yeah, I won't boast about numbers because they weren't anything to boast about, but I kept the ship afloat
you
as
did, no.
as
Well, I
best.
remember there were some issues like, "Austin's not getting this done." I'm like, Austin, like, he changed the oil on 10 cars today, and he said he was, like, coaching some guy in the field, and, "When do you make these phone calls?" I'm like, "Well, you can't do both." "Well, we have to do them both." Like, "Yeah, maybe we should be a little easier on him." Like, maybe what we're asking him to do is challenging, right? And so I remember being involved in some of those discussions about you. I'm like, look, the guy's like, and again, it's Orlando. It's like he's like literally sweating his backside off, right? Like, and then covered in oil, and then you got to come back and make some calls, and you're sort of like doing two things at once. I got a
Oh,
phone, and I'm trying to fill oil and answering questions, and so
yeah, definitely not ideal, but it gave me a lot of
it's
invaluable experience.
yeah, it's part of our management assessment process.
Yeah,
We give you way more than you can handle and see how you do. It's
yeah,
it's a reality in startups, right? When or high growth companies where, "Hey, dude, you're like the body, like, you're the warm body who can do something close to what we need done, like, go do it." "Well, I got another job." "Yeah, well, go do both," right? And then, how do you do? And in some cases, right, like, you you figure out, you had more capacity, like, "Hey, my other job was really only half a job. Now I'm good. I got a full job." And in other cases, you find out my other job was like 125% job, and now I got another 100% job, and I'm at 220, right? And you can surge for a couple weeks like that, but at some point, like that that breaks. And
yeah. I mean, I was happy to get it done. I was happy to be a part of it. The biggest reason for my change, it was I felt like it was myself. Maybe there was people above me that had some say, but I just felt like I wasn't giving 100% to either side at a
yeah,
certain. Either fam wasn't getting my all, or my local team here in Orlando wasn't getting my all. And
right,
I think being local in Orlando and seeing all these guys face to face on a daily basis, this is what I should be focusing on. And it's also a step into higher management and more skills that I have yet to learn.
yeah,
Uh, so I
yeah. So
took,
you became a supervisor, right? Right.
I did. I started out as the supervisor
Operations
under
supervisor.
Race, and I had worked with Race previously when I was on the fan team, so we kind of already had a good rapport. And we built that thing as far as we could build it. Sooner or later, some other management came in, and I worked with them briefly, uh, learning different skills from different managers here and there. Uh, but ultimately, when my time was up, I was offered the position at the Recon Center,
Right.
uh, and I took it in a heartbeat. It felt like something new, interesting, exciting. I think prior to me actually signing on, Recon had only been open for maybe 6 months or less. So
Yep.
definitely a fresh project that I was excited to get my hands on. And jumping into it, at first I was almost like, "Oh God, what did I get myself into?" Very little structure as you can expect with something that you're building from the ground up. You've got to build processes in place, and that's something that takes months, if not years, to do. But slowly but surely, we've come a long way, and we've got a great process. I'm not going to say every month is great, but we're definitely turning in the right direction, and
Yeah.
I take a lot of pride in seeing that success, not only in the numbers and the CPU standpoint, but also in myself. people are responding to me and in a much better way that I'm very happy about.
Yeah. Yeah, so some perspective from my or some, observations from my perspective. Um, One, I think the most difficult evolution for a spiffy manager is to go from employee to frontline manager, right? So to go from, you went from dispatch, which is basically a frontline employee, to managing technicians. And you have, when you're a frontline employee, you have people you work with and are your friends in some cases, right? Or they're peers. And then to get promoted and now you're in charge, there's this natural friction from the team. It's like, why you, right? Even if you're good, like if you're the best, there's always sort of this why you. And you know this, but I came from the army, and when that happened in the army, when you went from private to sergeant, they always moved you to a different unit. And it was sort of this bittersweet sort of thing for the guy because, like, they spent, a couple of years, a year, 2 years, whatever it was, with their buddies, and then they got promoted, huge success, they're making more money, they have more, training, all the other things, more opportunity, but then they go somewhere else and they don't work with them anymore, and so, um, a and they did that just because it's, like, easier to go somewhere else and like, "Hey, I'm the new boss, I'm in charge." You don't have the history where, they know all these stories about you, about, going out and hanging out with the guys, and making mistakes and all this sort of thing. And so that's the hardest thing. And we still work really hard. We haven't really conquered, we haven't cracked the code on how to promote people into supervisor, uh, and avoid that because, again, you gotta, in Florida, we have a lot of sites, so it would be easier than other places. But, you're a supervisor, you're a technician in Dallas, it's hard to say, well, do you want to move to Phoenix, right? I mean, the guys don't want to do that. It's like their family, that sort of thing. And so uh it's challenging, number one. Number two, I think you really started to thrive as a leader when you went over to Recon because it was a new team.
I agree.
Right. Right. And so you came in, you knew Spiffy, you knew the management processes, you knew the lingo, you knew the software. So like all the foundational stuff, you're like, hey, look, I got this. And then, you had a great boss in Jim Wilson. It was like, look, here's the things I need you to do every day, right? Talk to the customer, allocate the work, get the parts in, take care of the guys, right? Like, and you're a very hands-on guy. Like, I know you're out there doing some work, like some of the faster sort of work. Like, hey, look, I don't need a mechanic to do this. I'll just go bang it out myself. I'll put an air filter in, or you know, uh, whatever. I'll wipe the window clean if it needs to be cleaned. Whatever that little stuff is, right? You can go bang that out, and the technicians really appreciate that, right? Because they want to operate at their level, and they don't. There's always this he or she, the boss, is sitting in the office. Offices tend to be air conditioned, or work sites tend to not be air conditioned. So there's like, you know, that dude is sitting in the air conditioning and not doing any work. They really, that's just natural. Like there's natural management technician friction. But when you come out and you're like out there banging stuff out for them, it really helps. And you did a great job of that. And your site's one of our most successful and most profitable, right? Customers are happy. We have basically you service one customer. They're super happy. Low turnover on the technician side. We've had a little bit of turnover, but it tends to be like, guy hurt himself off work, and you have sort of these things you have no control over, right? It's just it's a it's which is nice, right? And so um it's been a really nice it's been a nice story for the team to see that progress. Um so congratulations on it.
Thank
Congratulations.
thank you.
Um
Yeah.
tell the audience, like, from car delivered to car delivered, right? When it comes in your possession and you start working on it to when we give it back to the customer, tell them sort of what the process is.
Yeah, so plain and short, we are here to inspect cars that are going to be then delivered to car sales rental branches and sold to your normal consumer, your mom, your dad, your sister, your friend, guy you went to college with, whoever. So the biggest part of that comes down to safety. We want everything to be as safe as possible. So Enterprise delivers us cars. It could be 5, it could be 10, it could be 20. Now we do get some type of indication on how many we'll receive. Well, when we're going to receive them within that week or 2 weeks, we have no idea. Again, it could be 5 every single day. It could be 100 all at once. That's the challenging part, kind of the unpredictability. But then again, once we do get the cars in, my focus, depending on how many cars we have, I usually split the shop up. Half of you guys on inspections, half of you guys on repairs. We can't do repairs unless we do inspections. So all the cars have to be inspected. We go through a 109-point inspection, checking brakes, suspension, power outlets, 109 different points on that car to make sure it's safe first and foremost, and then maybe cosmetically sound. That's more of a customer preference and an enterprise preference. After we do the inspection, I build out an estimate, sourcing parts from various vendors. I submit that estimate to enterprise. Enterprise either approves it or rejects it. We want them to approve everything. That's what we want. But sometimes they do reject a service. At that point, um, maybe we're not gonna, let's say,
Well, they may choose they may choose to sell it, to send it back to auction. Like, "Hey,
exactly, yeah,
hey,
wholesale.
our customer, this car is we can only sell it for so much. The repairs are gonna make it too expensive. We're gonna sell it to somebody else and let them go deal with it," right? And
Exactly.
so
Yeah, and like you said, sometimes it's not really the mechanic side of things, it's the paint, body work
right,
that's gonna add up.
right,
So, sometimes cars do get kicked, but when they don't get kicked, I then source the parts, we purchase them, we receive them, and then we assign out jobs. Obviously, we wanna get the cars to retail as soon as possible, so every car's got a date, and we work off the oldest cars first. That way they can get sold as quick as possible.
right,
Keep the cars off our books and keep the cars off our clients' books as well.
right. Yeah, so for employees and customers, the speed that we turn cars around is important to our client, the rental car company, because um, the vehicle is depreciating, right? So like every day you own it, it's worth a little bit less money. You know, if the car depreciates, 5,000, I'm making this up, $5,000 a year, it's depreciating, basically sort of like $400 a month, right? And so $400 a month is like you divide by 30, it's sort of like what, $15 a day or something. And so,
Yeah,
and if you got 1,000 cars in inventory, that's
definitely
$15,000
adds up.
a
Yeah,
day of depreciation. And so it's like little numbers turn into big numbers and time turns into, either profit or loss. And so, and we have to explain that to employees, right? That's why it's sometimes employees come on board and are like, why are you so bad out of shape? Why do these 2 hours matter? Or why do $20 matter, right? And that's what it is. Again, we service a lot of, and this, we service a lot of cars at airports, and a lot of time, we'll have 3 shifts, right? So we'll run all day and all night because cars get returned at night, and then the fleet, the client wants to rent them out in the morning, right? And so they have to be cleaned, they have to be safety inspected, and then if the car has hit a certain mileage, they need to have the oil change. We check the tires, maybe they need a new tire, that sort of thing. And so we're turning those, and this was new to me when back in 2018, we started servicing rental car companies. I'd show up at the airport at 7, 8 in the morning, and there's a branch manager, like the manager standing over the car. Like, I need this car. I'm like, dude, can you give me 15 minutes? I want my guy to do a great job. He's like, no, I need it now. The client who wants this car is standing at the counter,
yeah,
right? Like, because they wanted a white Suburban or a red Mustang or whatever sort of you know, the customer had some specific thing, and the client again wants to deliver that specific sort of experience for the customer. Um, for whatever reason, they have these cars, and so um, speed of turnaround, hey, it's got to be safe, it's got to be high quality, and it's got to be fast. And so we're constantly sort of juggling all those. We being mainly you, uh, and your team.
yeah.
So
There's definitely a sense of urgency when you walk into the shop every day.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
from myself all the way down to my technicians. They understand that if we don't get these cars out, we're not gonna get more cars in. You
yeah.
know, it's constant cycle.
Okay, so let's transition another question for you. You've had a lot of experience at YLL. You had experience at Spiffy as a dispatcher and fleet account manager dealing with technicians, and you've seen a lot of successful technicians and you've seen some unsuccessful technicians. And now you're a manager at one of our most profitable sites, and busiest sites, right? You guys are servicing hundreds of cars a month, right? What From your perspective, what makes a technician successful? Like what are the qualities that make them successful?
Um, this is going to sound very obvious, but I'm going to state it anyway. I think it just starts with the roots: getting up on time, dressing appropriately, showing up, being present, and being willing to learn. If you can just follow those few things, everything else is teachable, coachable, trainable. You just have to really show up and have a willingness to learn. Um, I mean, I do look for skills mechanically, obviously, but for the most part, we come across various makes and models, Nissans, Toyotas, Hyundais, you name it. Every car is slightly different. And if you're not able to kind of be coached onto how to work on these cars and what to do and what not to do, I mean, that's a recipe for failure, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So starting with the basics, getting enough sleep, eating enough, showing up to work on time, that's really what it comes down to. If you can do those few things and then be coachable, you can easily be successful at Spiffy.
Yeah, it's interesting. We talk about this in training, like, the first way to get promoted at Spiffy is show up on time in uniform and care, right? Like, and care
Exactly.
is sort of this bundle of stuff. Care for the customer, care about safety, care about your partners, care about the boss. Like everybody's got goals, objectives, challenges, constraints, limitations, and you know, uh, you need to go to court, right? Great, I understand you need to go to court. You knew about that, if you come to me tonight to go for a court appointment tomorrow, like, dude, you're not really helping me out. You knew about that a month ago. Like, the court system does not like turn that fast, right? They sent you a letter, they called you, this has been going on for a month. Like, you needed to mention this to me before the day of, right? Um, but again, it's just basic stuff, showing up on time and then hustling, right? And being a team player.
Definitely hustling. Yeah, I would put a big emphasis on that. This job is not for the weak-hearted or the lazy. I mean, you've got to
Yeah.
be put in the work, and you will get rewarded.
Yeah. And certainly in your case, I tell you, I tell people that, the people that can surge and hang in there are the ones who get promoted, right? Like, Addison talked about that too. He's just like, you know, just sometimes you get a lot of work, right? Edison told the story about going to, I sent him to Washington, DC to open up a new branch. And he's like, well, do we have like a plan for this? I'm like, Addison, like, go make it look like Raleigh and be successful. If you're confused, call me. Right? And he's like,
Yeah, you are.
and he was like 20. He's like, I'm 20, really? I'm like, yeah, that's like, look, dude, you're who I have, right? Like, let's go.
Yeah.
And he cited that and a bunch of other stories that were similar about, how he really developed a lot of confidence around his management skills and that sort of thing. I sort of see this same evolution in you. And again, I think as people look at when you're evaluating Spiffy against all the options out there where you can work, you know, we really try to promote guys internally, right? I mean, you're a great example of that. Um, how do we take someone who's, an hourly employee? I mean, in Addison's case, he started in 2014. He was making $10 an hour, you know. Now he lives in Tampa down by you. He's got a house, he's married, 2 dogs, 4 cars, like the whole thing. He's fully baked into American middle class, and happy about it. And so, um, yeah, interesting. So what like tell me some interesting stories about the Recon Center. Like what's like if you had to tell a couple stories to someone who was interviewing for the position down there, or even, I mean, you have a lot of experience with the bigger Orlando market. Um, Tell me some stories about some interesting things that aren't so obvious from the outside, but inside, like, hey, this stuff happens all the time.
Some interesting stories. Um, I keep falling back on this, but I think ever since I did take over the Recon site, just the change I've seen from the technician level, to myself to the customer level has been phenomenal. Uh, I often ask for feedback from technicians. Hey, is this working? Is this not working? Do you
Yeah,
like this? Do you not like this? To gauge where I'm at and where they're at. And I've got a lot of positive feedback. The numbers are speaking for themselves.
yeah,
Our client vigorously tells me
yeah, they're
how
happy.
happy they are.
Yep,
So all that plays into, okay, we're doing the right thing. We need to keep it going. And to me, that's the most rewarding part about working for Spiffy is being the head of the snake that gets to build something
yeah,
that is then in turn successful
Yeah.
that they use to replicate in other markets that they are going to open up in the future. I've gotten calls from new Recon sites where, the manager is just starting and he's calling me, "Hey, Austin, how do you do this? How is this done? What's your suggestion on this?" Um, and it's very rewarding getting to help those new people, so they can then be successful, and hopefully in turn that will just fall down the line. Somebody will
Yeah.
call them asking for help, and they can just keep the ball rolling. So
Yeah.
I very much take pride and enjoy seeing the success in building something here at Spiffy and being a part of it. It
Yeah.
feels great.
Yeah, thanks. I know I sent a couple of guys your way to train them. They're like, "How do I learn how to do this?" I'm like, "We're just gonna send you to Florida and you can sit next to Austin for a week." Well, and you not only did you train them, but you had to go run your own business at the same time, right? And so
Yeah.
thank you for that. Um, yeah, so and what's interesting is like your team not only meets the numbers, like you put up really good numbers from a standpoint of processing cars and processing them fast, but you also have high quality, right? We have a very low you and your team have a very low comeback, what they call comeback rate, right? And so, you know, hey, we changed the brake pads. Are they squealing, right? Do we tighten them properly? Hey, that we don't have that problem. Did you know, did we check every USB port? Does every window again, from a customer standpoint, anything that's electric, we're like testing it and making sure it works, right? Are the dome lights on? Every light and bulb in the car, we're testing because we don't want the client, our client, the rental car company, to sell a car to a customer and then come back and like the dome light doesn't work, the rear right window doesn't go down. There's all these like little things that happen to used cars at, sort of 20, 30,000 miles that we want to fix. And the client wants them to be of high quality. And the comebacks are very low there, which is nice.
They
And
are very low. And what we found is I don't have an exact percentage, but the majority of our comebacks come from other markets. So a
right,
car gets sold in another market, finds its way to Orlando, and they say, "Hey, not to
the
toot my
client,
friend
the client,
Spiffy, great shop. Let's take it there."
yeah, the client knows that. They've told me that, which is good. Like that's, hey, we fix other people. I'm like, fine, send it. We'll fix other people. We will fix others' problems.
No
And
problem.
yeah, no problem at all. So tell me what's the hardest part of your job today?
I would argue, and depending on what day you ask me, this is probably going to be a different answer every
Right?
day. But I think overall, the hardest part is the unpredictability.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned earlier, they tell me I'm going to get cars, but it's when, how many, are they going to be this week? Is it going to be next week? How do I staff my team accordingly
Mhm.
um, to service the client and keep my team morale happy? Like
Right.
I don't want my team thinking business is dried up and they're going to start looking for other jobs. It's usually never the case.
Right.
So just coming in every day and kind of not really knowing what to expect is challenging. So I try to get a good game plan the day prior. All right, here's what we talked about today. Here's kind of what's in the pipeline. If we do get all these cars like they say, this plan. If we don't get all the cars that they say, here's our backup plan. If
Right.
everything goes to shit, here's our final third
Right.
plan. Usually it works in one of those three, usually the top two, but that is always challenging to work around. Especially with big dollars in play. You've
Right.
always got to be conscious of the numbers, your clients' numbers, just numbers in general. And like you said, it's a juggling act from day to day, hour to hour, almost minute to minute, really.
Yeah. So from an employee standpoint, short-term planning is today, medium-term planning is tomorrow or the next day, and long-term planning is like next week. That's 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 what Austin just said, and that's why he's successful because he thinks about it that way. Um, it's something that I spend a lot of time talking to new managers about. Like you knew that because you were part of the team. Like you're an internal promotion. You're like, look, things move fast around here. Things change a lot. Like we have to be able to react to that quickly. I would tell you, if you're a manager coming in from the outside, that's the biggest change is that, you need to really be able to have primary alternate contingency plans. You basically articulated that. And there's like, hey, what's going on today? What can we do tomorrow? And then what's going on next week? And the hard part, as an employee, we're posting So our standard is we post next week's schedule this week on Wednesday. So on a Wednesday of this week, you'll see next week's schedule. Um, some markets, especially like Austin's, where it tends to be more predictable. Not always, but more predictable. Like the schedules are pretty similar from week to week. Some of our markets are pretty radically different from week to week. Uh,
Mhm.
and we have some customers we service them once a month, twice a month, once a week, and then some customers we service every day. And so there's this spiking of the business. Weather affects that, right? Hey, there's a snowstorm, the whole place shut down, for 2 days. The maintenance doesn't really change, and so we have to go catch up. So then, like, you're off for 2 days, and then you're working overtime for like 4 days. And and if you like that, that's awesome. If that really tweaks you and you just want, like, I wanna show up at, 8:59 and leave at 4:01 every day predictably, do the same thing, put widgets in a machine and stamp them out, you're it's probably not a great place for you, right? You're gonna get frustrated pretty quickly. That's one of the things that when people leave, they get frustrated with the schedule change. If you want a lot of work and you don't mind the schedule change and you like the dynamism of that, then it's a great place to work.
Yeah,
Uh,
100%.
and again, I think, people in your position, right, the city leaders or the managers of teams work really hard to bring consistency and then bring that flexibility in. Um, but the business is the business and it is what it is.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree. Schedule changes do play a heavy part in technicians leaving. Um, Fortunately, we don't have too many schedule changes at my location just due to the
Yeah,
number of technicians that I have and the
yeah,
work that we receive. There's
right.
almost always something to do. Um, but I think the guys understand that this is a great opportunity, and sometimes the business is seasonal, and it's nothing personal. I'm
Yeah.
trying to watch out you today so we all can have a
Yeah.
place to work in 6 months.
Well, yeah, the last time I was in Orlando, I heard that from your team. They're like, "Look, we're happy to work Saturdays because we wanna make the customer happy and, it'll it'll get slower and we'll get, Friday afternoons off, right, or whatever it might be." And so they have that mindset. Clearly, you're talking to them about that. The other nice thing about our recon centers is, most of that work across the country is inside a building, right? We have lifts, there's air compressors, it's a proper shop versus, a van. We change oil in fields, right? I mean, last year we had this one customer who's buying all these used cars. We must have done 5,000 oil changes for this customer across the country in different locations, and it's like, "Hey, we have a farm in Lancaster, Pennsylvania that has 1,000 cars that need to be inspected, and then we need fresh tires and oil in every one of them, or we need to inspect them for tires, put fresh tires where they need fresh tires, and then we need to change the oil on them." And, we take that business, right? We drive a
Yeah.
truck out there, drive a trailer out there, put a shipping container. I mean, if we gotta fly it in with a helicopter, we floated trucks and equipment to islands, quite literally, and we'll do whatever it takes to service a customer. So, your location, there's an address, there's a bathroom, a refrigerator, a microwave.
Yeah, I trust me, I've definitely seen worse. Very grateful to be at this location, but
Yeah,
that's just part of the spiffy culture. We grind it out here. We do what we
yeah,
have to service the client.
yeah, excellent. Um, awesome. So, as we're wrapping up, any questions for me?
No, I mean, I just can't express enough how happy I am to work here and continue to be a part of the ever evolving changes that Spiffy is going through to always get to that next level. It's just unbelievably rewarding.
Awesome. Thanks, Austin. Hey, I appreciate your hard work. Please tell your team thanks for the making the customers happy. And I'm wrapping up. My name's Karl Murphy, the president and co-founder of Get Spiffy. And this is Inside Voices, Career Paths at Spiffy. Thanks for listening.